Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I would like to thank each and every one of you who left a comment in yesterday's video. We did it, we hit 1k. Although officially at this moment in time we're only on 992, I'm quite sure that between now and the video's release, this one, and by the time you hear this, we would have hit 1,000 comments. So thank you so much. It really makes me happy. And I couldn't have done it without any of you. There's no need to keep going if you don't want to. But if you want to keep commenting, you can. I'm not going to ask anymore though. I also want to give a huge thank you to Ainsikins, this week's Patreon star. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/mortismedia. Probably. But anyway, for now guys, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I had just turned 19 and was about a month into my sophomore year in college, 4 hours away from home. I had been feeling very ill for days, and after being misdiagnosed by the campus health center with strep throat, I didn't even have a sore throat. I finally asked a friend to take me to the local ER. I was admitted immediately with a severe kidney infection. I would later find out from reading my medical records that doctors were concerned I had a heart attack due to my crazy high blood pressure and heart rate. I was in so much pain, but hadn't been given anything besides a shot of Taradol. Basically, super ibuprofen, in the ER at 10 AM. It was now 7 PM, and I hadn't been seen by any doctors since being admitted, as they were waiting for a specialist to get there. This is when the situation turned paranormal. I was in the hospital bed, and my friend that had driven me was sitting next to me in a chair, keeping me company. Suddenly at the foot of my bed, a woman just kind of materialized. I quickly realized I was seeing my nonny, my mother's mother, who died when I was 5 years old. I went wide-eyed thinking of all the stories I'd heard from nurses that say that when patients start seeing deceased loved ones, they wind up dying shortly after. And it's like their loved ones who came to escort them over to the other side. My nonny was wearing a blue muumuu, which she had approximately 1,000,000 of those type of dresses in rainbow of colours. She just smiled at me reassuringly and disappeared as quickly as she had appeared. I asked my friend if she just saw a woman at the foot of my bed, and she told me no, and looked at me as if I was going nuts. Now, of course, this may have just been some kind of hallucination from the insane amount of pain I was on, as once I saw a doctor, I was on the good stuff for a week, and that's what skeptics explain it away as. But I really think my nonny visited me. I have further evidence that it was her, or that there was some insane coincidence afoot in the hospital. See, the doctor finally came in to see me at around 10 PM. I did a double take when he walked in. This man looked exactly like my nonny's husband, my pop-up. He died when I was 3, but I remember him, and of course we have pictures. My mum came to visit me and had tears in her eyes when she met this doctor, because she said he could have been her father's twin. So I of course told my mother about seeing Nonny, and she agreed with me, especially after seeing the doctor that looked just like her father. It really seemed like her mother had come to pay me a visit. I was seriously ill. The staff later told me they didn't think I would make it, especially after not responding to antibiotics for the first few days. Some of them even told me they prayed for me. Hell, even the very kind custodian that cleaned my room told me she prayed for me because she saw how miserably ill I looked. So we now think Nonny visited because she knew how poorly I was, and she knew how scared I was. So she wanted to comfort me. When I was very little, and was ill with a cold or sore throat or something like that, I always wanted her to be the one to take care of me, and make me her special soup. I think she knew I needed her comfort and reassurance, so she found a way to provide that, even after death. I worked at a hospital during transport for a couple of years. The transport home base was in the basement of the hospital, where all the laundry is done and supplies are also sorted there. I hated working late nights after this incident. One particular night, I was the only one in the basement when I heard whistling at the end of the hallway by the elevator. I poked my head around the corner, expecting to see my only co-worker on duty that night, but there was absolutely no one there. I shrugged it off. I'm not easily spooked. Nights are slow, so I ate some snacks and hung out in the break room for a bit. Next thing I know, I hear a loud bang. I walked into the hallway, and a bed is rolling down the hall, bumping into the sides. At this point, I think my co-worker is bullshitting me. I radio him, and he says he's upstairs in the cafeteria. I still don't believe him, and think I'll catch him in the act. I walk past the laundry room, and the machines start. I pop my head in expecting to find him, but it's completely empty. Okay, and I start to get a little nervous. I walk into the laundry room, and the machines stop completely. I freeze, then run out, and head towards the elevator when I hear the whistling again. At this point, I know I'm not the only worker in the basement. As I'm standing there waiting for the elevator, things start falling off the shelves down the hall. Boxes of gloves, tissues, packages of tubes. I'm literally standing there watching them all fall off one by one at the opposite end of the hallway. I shit you not. My entire body broke out in goosebumps. My hair stood on end, and I had this strong gut feeling I was being watched. I was not alone. As I'm getting to the elevator, I feel what feels like someone brushing my arm. I went upstairs and found my co-worker in the cafeteria, freaked him out, and got the hell out of there and transferred soon after that. The creepy thing to add to this is that I usually whistle mindlessly to myself at work. It was almost as if the spirit were mimicking me. Creepiest feeling ever. I was transferred to the operating room soon after that. I was part of an emergency C-section where a baby was lost. My co-worker and I occasionally heard a baby's cry in the hallway at night. The security officers have also witnessed some crazy things as well. So maybe a year or so later, I bought my first house. It was a 2-story wood-floored house that had been well loved and lived in. On the day it closed and the sale went through, I went there late at night after I'd gotten the key. I went upstairs into the master bedroom, just in awe of this house that was mine, when I heard footsteps start at the bottom of the staircase and walk slowly up. I had bought my house from a family friend, so I assumed it was him. I walked to the staircase and say, "Hey Brendan," thinking it was him coming to celebrate with me. Of course, the staircase was empty. Fast forward to moving day. I'm moving my stuff in, and all day long I can hear footsteps going up and down the stairs. It got to the point where I actually got annoyed of it because it was so loud. A few days later, my sister and her husband moved in. That night, we could all hear the kitchen drawers and cupboards opening and closing, and a man and a woman's voice whispering. The worst part was the whispering. At first I thought I was being robbed, but when you turn the corner and all the noises stop and there's no one there? Creepy feeling. We had a priest come and bless the house soon after that. My brother-in-law refused to live there until it was taken care of. and he never believed in spirits or ghosts until this incident, and he thought I was crazy. My sister and I took a picture of the staircase one particularly noisy night, and there are orbs with faces on them. I'm being so honest here. I'll see if she still has it, because this was 5 years ago. As my dad is finishing his last few days of treatment and rehab, I went to the facility he's in to visit him for Father's Day. Up until a few days ago, he was in a facility in Jamestown for several months. It sits next to the North Dakota State Hospital. Somehow, we started talking about paranormal stuff and his experiences there. A short history on this hospital. It opened in 1885 and became an institution for the mentally ill and criminally insane. Within the next couple of years, overcrowding became a huge problem, so the hospital was forced to expand multiple times, while also being severely understaffed. In 1937, the governor fired the institution's superintendent and 75% of the staff and rehired new people in their place because of their political contributions. After this, the new staff were very underqualified to care for the patients and treated them badly by cussing and abusing them, and probably killing them. By 1947, the news of overcrowding, neglect, malnutrition, seclusion, including many tuberculosis patients, hit the news, and by 1953, reforms started happening, and things started getting better. By 1974, the population dropped from over 2,000 in the 1940s to about 600, and about 200 today. And yes, the place is still in operation. Today, the hospital now serves as a place for psychiatric services, transitional living, and treatment for chemical dependency. Thank you, Wikipedia. My dad liked to stay busy over there, so he would always take jobs or helped out in any way he could. From my understanding, the hospital was kind of like a partner institution for his rehab place, but the people were more like inmates, where he could leave and had much more freedom. He went to the side of the hospital that acts as a prison today and helped one of the ladies who works there with the laundry. They folded tons of sheets, towels, and went downstairs for something, and when they came back for the sheets, they were thrown on the floor and all messed up. Keep in mind that everything there stays locked up, so nobody could have been in there to do that. The lady told my dad that it was Charlie, the ghost in that part of the prison. Apparently he does stuff like that all the time. The lady told my dad that they have names for the different ghosts all around the prison, because there are so many of them. They even have a few rooms that they had to block off, because any time a resident/inmate would move into them, they would refuse to go back, because so much creepy stuff happened, that they would just end up having to move them to a different room. Even the old warden's office was so haunted that he told them if they couldn't find him a new space for his stuff, he was going to quit his job and move on. My dad said apparently things would move all around and go flying off the shelves. Since he was able to leave frequently and have a job outside the facility while he was there, he and a couple of guys took a local job doing weed whipping or lawn stuff on the hospital grounds and the cemetery. He was working with a small crew of guys in the middle of the afternoon. The part of the hospital grounds they were working on are no longer in operation, but the building they were by had lots of windows so you could see everything inside. He and another guy saw someone walking around in there, so they let their boss know that someone else was working there too. Nah, nobody works there. Nobody's been in there for years, his boss said. They joked around about seeing a ghost, and came to learn that paranormal activity is super common there. My dad is a no BS kind of guy, but he and the other guys saw him so clearly that they could see his clothes and everything. "What did you see him wearing?" the other guys said to my dad in a super scared voice. "Yeah," my dad said, "someone's messing with us." That was a person. They kept working even though they were creeped out. Then they saw him again. My dad said the same apparition came walking really fast down the hallway towards them. They could still see it in the window, and darted around the corner into the garage. He was wearing an old-timey black and white suit with a hat to go, and he kept his head down like he was trying to hide his face from them. The guy with my dad took off running and said he was done working there because he was so scared. But my dad yelled at him to run around the front so that they could catch the guy who was trying to freak them out. They went around to all possible doors, and absolutely no one was there. Somehow the boss ended up getting the keys so they could investigate in that part, and my dad said it was so dusty that they could see their footprints, and the only footprints they saw in there were their own. So there was zero chance that there was any trace of the man. My dad told me he knows for a fact that the place is haunted as hell. That guy must have been doing some shady stuff, because he kept ducking away from us and hiding his face. When I was 5 years old, we had just moved to the airbase, and my dad was security forces. I wasn't old enough to go to the youth center, so some days my dad would take me with him to his office. The base was a former army fort, established during the days of the railroad, and had a lot of old buildings. My family lived in a newer development not that far away from the youth center. Many of the old buildings were turned into office space or housing. The old hospital buildings were converted into office space a long time back, and they were within a walking distance from my bus stop. I had to pass the old cemetery base on the way there, but that's a different story entirely. I remember my dad's office being on the 3rd floor, overlooking a parking lot, surrounded with large trees, and at the end of a long hallway. When I would go with him to his office, I had to be in there the entire time, or in the office, because I was a minor, and I couldn't reach the keypad for the elevators or the doors to the stairwell. It's a base, and everything is locked. I'd hear stories from him and my uncle about weird stuff happening in the building at night, when my uncle would come over for barbecue, but never thought anything of it. I was a kid after all. I didn't comprehend the concept of ghosts quite yet. One day my dad had to leave to go drop a file off at a different office in the building, 1 floor down, at the end of the hall. He said that he'd only be gone a minute. I wasn't too worried. I had my Bernstein bear book, my stuffed wolf, and a snack. He said he'd leave the door open this time so that I could get a drink, just in case. I said okay, and that was that. I listened to Dad walk down the hall, punch in the code on the door, and the door slammed behind him. Like a kid, I continued to goof around until I heard bootsteps in the hall. They were heavy and slow, like they didn't have a purpose and were just on a casual stroll. A man in uniform popped his head around the doorframe. I thought he looked funny. It wasn't any uniform I'd seen an airman wear. It's been so long, I can't remember what he looked like. But he smiled at me, and I waved like an idiot. "Good afternoon, little lady." He tipped his hat, chuckled, and kept walking. I waited to hear the sound of the doors unlock and slam shut, but it never came, and the sound of his feet stopped halfway down the hall. I continued on with my day, only realizing what I had experienced weeks later, after saying something offhand to my mum about the old thing. Needless to say, I refused to set foot into that brick building now. Like most people, I've never been a big fan of hospitals. Sure, I appreciate that they're there, but I never want to be in one. I guess most people don't. This story happened about 10 years ago, when I lost my grandfather. It wasn't looking good. He'd got cancer, and at his age, with the conditions that he had previously, chemo seemed like a very poor choice, and he opted to just sit it out, enjoy his final days, be with his family, and let it take him. He wanted to go in peace. He was 89 years old, mind you, so he'd seen his fair share of life and the world. Still, it's not an easy thing knowing that you're about to die, nor is it easy on all your family. My grandmother was taking it specifically very hard. We're all gathered around the bed, holding his hand, talking to him, reliving old memories, and he seems to be so with it. It seems like there's almost nothing wrong, that the cancer isn't real, that there's nothing in his head, and that we can just walk out together and go back home. But it really isn't. From day to night, something happened, and it got bad. The day before, he was talking, chatty, happy, eating, and then the next day, everything changed. It was like his head had started to melt. He'd open his eyes briefly, mutter something, and close them again. I wasn't really sure what to do. If this was the end or not, or if he was just having an episode and would be back. None of us knew what was going on. It wasn't until 3 days after, when I went back, did the doctor take me aside to a room and explain to me that he was reaching the end of his life. They said that he'd be out by the week. I started to cry. I wasn't ready to lose my grandfather. Is anyone ever ready to lose someone in their life? No. The next 3 days, all of the family stayed. We called off work, we called off school, and any other commitment, and made sure that he knew we were there. What made it more painful is seeing him in that bed, almost like a husk, empty and lifeless, occasionally managing to babble out a few words, and then seemingly drifting off to sleep again. His eyes would never fully open. They'd remain almost always closed. I held his hand and tried to talk to him. I asked him to move if he understood me, if he was hearing me, but received no movement. It pained me so much to see what he was going through. I couldn't bear it. That same night, we were all sitting around, some of us asleep, as it was about 2 a.m. at the point. I was there with him, holding his hand, dozing off on a plastic chair. And then I feel it. I was pretty sure he had gone. The warmth in his hand had ceased. We called for a doctor, and he came in, but that was it. My grandfather had officially passed away. His eyes were already closed. We said our final goodbyes, and it was the painful moment when he was taken away and out of sight. That hospital, for reference, is the only one in our town. It's relatively big for the area that we live in, and is the biggest one for miles around, so it takes people from everywhere in the area. That was it. He moved on. It was a lovely funeral, and of course we all cried. Of course the story doesn't end there though. No. 5 years later, I was in a horrific car accident. I'm gonna be honest, it was entirely my fault. I was running late for an appointment, on my cell phone, and trying to drive at 80 on the motorway. I didn't see the other cars slowing down for the traffic, and I rammed right into the back of another vehicle, although I slowed down just in time for the crash not to be life-threatening. I'm so grateful that the guy in front of me was alright. I don't think they found out that I was on my phone, but damn, I was in a lot of pain. I was transported to the same hospital, no doubt, and I was pretty confident that I was going to reach the end of my life. I remember blacking out and waking up many, many hours later. My arms and legs had been heavily damaged, as well as my body itself. I wasn't sure what they'd done to me at this point, but I was just coming in and out of consciousness. As I was doing so, I looked up to see the doctors. My vision was blurred, and it was at that very moment that I swear I saw my grandfather. Now keep in mind I was probably heavily medicated, but why would I picture him at such a tragic moment? I was just thinking about how stupid I was and how I was going to tell my family, and then all of a sudden he's standing there behind the doctors, moving his head, trying to get a better look at me. I close my eyes again and wake up hours later. The room is empty, and it's just me, listening to the sound of machines behind me. I try to move, but the pain is indescribable. Turns out I'd shattered both my legs, and the airbag had done some serious damage to my chest. Not to mention my head was all bloodied, and cuts were all over my body. I'm so grateful that I didn't have to get anything amputated. I lay there in the silence, listening to the bleeps all around me. I passed out again, and then I had the strangest dream. I was with my grandfather, and we were just talking, the way we used to. He was telling me about his latest fishing trip, and at one point he interjected. He stopped talking and said, "You can't come with me." I didn't know what he was talking about, and he said, "I'm sorry I'm not around anymore, but my time came. Stay strong. You'll be alright. You'll come out of this. You're my big boy, okay?" That's what he used to call me when I was small. All of this came out of nowhere in the dream, and just like that, I woke up. The room was dark and empty. I'm not sure how to explain this. Was it paranormal? Was it just my mind trying to comfort me, piecing together the fact that I may or may not have seen the ghost of my grandpa in the hospital? I don't know. I never did see him again, and although I did recover eventually, the feelings and thoughts never went away. I did look after my grandma, and she's still alive and kicking today. I just want to say thank you for giving me strength, Grandpa. You really don't know how much that helped me go through everything. I don't know if it was all in my head, but it meant the world to see you one last time, and to know that you were with me in my darkest hour. And for those of you interested, I lost my license and haven't driven since. It's okay though. Buses are cool. I used to work as a CNA. My shift would start at 2 p.m. and I was supposed to end at 11 at night. However, if I had to train the girl on nights, that meant I had to stay till 4:30 in the morning. Being a nurse tech is hard work, so you'd imagine by 2 or 3 in the morning, I was tired and sleep deprived. One night I was working a long shift. We did rounds every hour, so we were going through, and a resident requested a nurse. So we told the nurse she was wanted. Now since we did rounds, that meant we checked on all residents. Typical night. They were all sleeping. We went back to the nurse's station and sat down. The nurse still in the same resident's room, talking low, very abruptly and loud. We heard the loudest baby cry. One of those cries where a mother just knows something was wrong. I shot up out of my chair and immediately tried to follow where we heard it. Odd thing, it came from everywhere. It didn't echo from hall to hall. It sounded as if the same noise came from all 3 halls surrounding us. I ordered my co-worker to check patients again. No change. Everyone asleep. I thought I was in denial and kept asking my co-worker if she heard the same thing, and she agreed she did. We waited until the nurse came out of the resident's room and asked if she heard it, and she had done as well, but didn't know how to react, being that she was with a resident and didn't want to freak them out. That place used to be a regular hospital with a morgue at the very bottom. Many nurses hated working nights due to the weird experiences that they would encounter. I'll never forget that baby's blood-curdling cry, nor can I explain it. I'm a night shift nurse in a hospital in North Carolina. Before I tell my story, let me give you some background information about my hospital. There are 4 floors in total. The ground floor contains the lobby, gift shop, cafeteria, pharmacy, and outpatient services. The first floor has the lab, ICU, ER, and the vending machines. The second floor where I work is the med-surg hall. Finally, the third floor is mostly conference rooms and HR. In the past, the first floor contained our OB and L&D, and pediatrics. These floors closed due to a lack of demand in the community. Most nights, I have my routine pat down. I eat my lunch at midnight between medication passes and get hungry again around 3 a.m. Naturally, I run down to the vending machines and on the first floor for a snack. There are vending machines by the ICU and ER, with a long hallway cutting through the empty pediatric ward separating them. The vending machine in the ICU was out of order, so I decided to cut through the peds and grab a snack from the other. As I walked down the dim stretch of hallway, I heard a noise. Upon further inspection, it sounded like a child's laughter. Being the prudent nurse that I am, I started searching rooms to make sure that no child was just wandering a smuck in the dark. I checked each room and saw no one. No TVs were on in any room. I brushed it off as my imagination and continued my trek to the other vending machine. On my way back though, I heard the noise again and felt something tugging on the bottom of my scrub top. I broke out in a cold sweat and booked it for the elevator without turning back. When I mentioned it to the more seasoned nurses on the unit, they mentioned that no one else goes down there by themselves for that exact reason. It is common knowledge that patients pass away in the hospital, and many nurses believe that some lost souls wander the corridors looking for companionship. This story happened to me when I was in my local hospital. I had been working for an underground utility company, and we were building a hiking trail and putting in pipes for a new nature park. The park was designed so that all of the reclaimed and cleaned water from the sewage plant would be pumped into swamps to refurbish the swamps that were now almost dry. The swamp would naturally finish cleaning the water and create a new habitat. So in order to do this, we built new lift stations to the plant to collect the clean water to be pushed to the swamps. So I had been working sealing the concrete underground storage tanks that were on the first lift station and was testing for leaks. Naturally, it's unavoidable to not get any water on you, The water is clean enough to be put into a swamp, but certainly not for human consumption. I got splashed pretty heavily, and for a few days later became very ill. I went to my local hospital. That is very old, and to the point is basically just what I call a big boo-boo stop. They can handle minor problems, but most bigger issues they send you to bigger hospitals. So my wife and I are sitting in one of the ER rooms, and they have given me an IV of fluids and antibiotics. It's a 2-bedroom with the curtains, and they have the lights turned off because they bought a woman that's experiencing a migraine. They come in and take her for a scan. I'm laying in my bed facing that side of the room. My wife is sitting beside me trying to comfort me, because whatever it was that had me sick is causing excruciating stomach pain. Everything is very quiet, and we live in a very small town, with a census of 590. So other than the medical staff, there were maybe 4 patients in the ER. All of a sudden, we both hear from behind the curtain a female voice that's very raspy say, "Oh God, help me." My wife looks at me and I say, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do we need to call a nurse?" My wife goes, "Didn't they just come and get her a few minutes ago?" So we sit in uncomfortable silence, when suddenly again we hear, this time more urgently, "Please someone help me, save me." My wife jumps up and starts going over to the curtain, because we see it moving like someone's behind it. She jerks the curtain back, and no one's on the other side. We're naturally freaking out. I hit the call button and a nurse comes in. We know her, so we tell her what happened. She just plainly states, "Yeah, that happens sometimes, I'm sorry." She then goes, "But at least you're not here at night, when the kids we hear and see come out to play." Creepiest day at the hospital I've ever had, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Back in 1996, I was working at a hospital on the outskirts of a large city. It was a newish hospital, but it was built on the grounds of a large Victorian insane asylum. The old Victorian building was still there, and still very much in use as a mental health facility. As part of the hospital buildings, there was accommodation for staff. Here's where it gets interesting. I was living alone in one of the flats in the new section of buildings. After I'd lived there a few weeks, I started to notice that every time I was just falling asleep, someone would shout my name. It didn't matter what time it was. After day shifts, night shifts, and general days off sofa napping, without fail, my name would be shouted. I could not determine whether the voice was male or female, but it wasn't a very deep voice. This was also associated with the 2 other occurrences. I had a bead curtain, which would spontaneously move, but in a way that looked like someone was running their hand across it, so it would undulate and ripple. Nothing like when the wind caught it. If I had a window open, the other was involving my phone. Back in those days, mobiles were rare, so I had an old-fashioned home phone with a bell, which would ring like an old-fashioned alarm clock when I got a call. So along with the curtain and the name calling, this phone would make a noise like someone had flicked the bell. There would be a sequence of 3 taps of the bell at random times. After a few weeks of getting increasingly tired because of interrupted sleep, I got irritated and spoke to the room. I firmly but politely explained the situation and requested that it let me sleep. I settled back down into bed and tried to get back to sleep. At the point I was falling asleep again, the voice changed to a shh. Exactly how you would comfort a child to sleep. This happened for a few days, and then everything stopped, and they were gone. I have no idea who or what it was, but it was real. This story comes from my dad, who was a security guard for a hospital in our small town. The hospital was built in 1908, established in a mining community, and then turned into a nursing home for miners. My dad had the responsibility of walking around and locking up the offices, and making sure no one else stood around after 10 p.m. There was a 3-story building. The bottom is where the basement, an old morgue, was, and the second floor being the meeting offices, kitchen, gym, dialysis center, and visitor bathrooms. The upper floor being where all the elderly residents stayed and were taken care of. He says he was walking on the second floor, locking up the bottom visitor door and checking offices for people around 11 p.m. He walked by the women's and men's visitor bathroom near the gym. As he was walking by, he heard a woman who hacked a very loud, obnoxious cough, ripped a paper towel from the dispenser, and then went quiet. He waited by the ladies' door for someone to come out. However, no one did. He waited a little longer, and still nothing. He finally knocked on the door saying, "Ma'am?" No response. He slowly opened the door. The light was off, and it was only an echo that filled the hall when the door loudly squeaked open. He turned the light on. No one was there. He checked the 2 stalls and the small shower that was in there, all empty. When he glanced near the trash, he noticed a piece of torn paper towel, shriveled up and thrown in. He quickly walked out the restroom and left. To this day, he swears the cough was as clear as day, loud and eerie. He can't explain it, and he's a skeptic in the paranormal. But there are many other stories of personal experiences that I have also had in that same building. I used to rent out an apartment in a complex called the Beacon in New Jersey. It was 4 to 5 buildings that used to be a hospital center. It's also famous because the staircase scene in the Titanic movie, yes, that one, was filmed there. It's on the historical registry, so they can't change anything structural about the building, but they did a pretty good job of converting it into nice apartments. Now, my husband and I lived on floor B, the basement. Obviously, this place had problems. We still had windows and stuff, but technically, we were in the basement area. I don't know what our place was before, but I'm sure it was not the morgue. From what I heard, they didn't use that area for apartments, and it was in another building, thankfully. But still, the entire time we lived there were little things that happened that made us uneasy. This was a studio, and we had no pets, so there was a whole lot of space to be. Several times, I would feel what I thought was my husband getting into bed. You know, you feel the blankets move and the bed goes down. I would roll over, and he would be working or in the bathroom. Sometimes this would happen, and I knew it wasn't him, because he was traveling for work. But I could feel something lay down and put their arm around me while I was half asleep. I'm not a cuddly person, so this wouldn't be a muscle memory thing. Obviously, there were also little noises and bangs, but it's hard to attribute that to paranormal, since this is Jersey, and almost everyone is an asshole neighbor. For the most part, it was just the bed thing, and feeling watched occasionally. Nothing super scary or unnerving in my apartment, but I'm sure that the entire complex has weird stuff going on. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. A huge thank you to all my patrons. Those lovely people can be seen on screen. Your contributions mean the world to me, so thank you so much. They really help keep everything ticking over here, at Mortis Media, and I'm really grateful. If you'd also like to become a patron and have your name featured on this list, just look on patreon.com and you'll get some awesome perks for signing up. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget a like, and you can comment too if you want. There's also the subscribe button, pretty magical, but best used with the bell icon, which you guys should definitely press to get your nightly spooks hand delivered to you by the souls of the dead, or YouTube's algorithm, whichever one you believe in most. If there's a story that you wish to share, feel free to send it to my email, or alternatively, you can post it on my Reddit page. Please be sure to be generous on those details and your punctuation and paragraphing, as that makes for the best stories. But anyway, for now guys, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.